thank you so much for joining us today. We're talking with former Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives, Republican from Georgia, Newt Gingrich, co-author of The Contract with America, the former 2012 presidential candidate, Fox News contributor, and author of 41 books, including his latest, just came out, Beyond Biden, Rebuilding the America We Love. His website, Gingrich360.com, and of course you can tweet him at Newt Gingrich. Congressman, you've been pushing tax cuts on the rich forever. It was at the core of your Contract on America. And the result seems to have been huge budget deficits and massive inequality. Are you ready to acknowledge that the economy worked better for Republican voters during the 1940 to 1980 era, when the top tax rate was between 91 and 74%?
I don't know where you got that. I think that's nuts.
We had, when Reagan came into office, there was an $800 million budget deficit. We were not even at $800 billion. We weren't even at $1 trillion. He took it from $800 million to $2.4 trillion, and it's been on an upward trajectory ever since.
Well, first of all, it hasn't been an upward trajectory ever since, because when I was Speaker, we balanced the budget for 4 straight years. The whole premise of what you just asked me doesn't reflect my career at all. We actually were paying down the national debt, and we actually had Alan Greenspan, who was then the chairman of the Federal Reserve, testified that at the rate we were paying down the national debt, if it continued, he wasn't sure how the Fed would manage the money supply because there wouldn't be any U.S. bonds to sell. The period when I was Speaker, we cut the capital gains tax. We had an explosive growth rate. We increased revenue dramatically. We reformed welfare. People went to work. More children came out of poverty during that period than any time in American history. Their parents went to work. They earned an income. They were beginning to rise. And as I said, the budget was balanced for 4 straight years. So, in my career, I'm not going to try to defend other things, but in my career, what you just said is just factually wrong.
Well, the economy was growing, absolutely, and growing economies generate more tax revenue. And yes, we've had 2 Democratic presidents since Reagan who have balanced budgets, and no Republican presidents that have done so. But then George W. Bush came along and did another Gingrich-style massive tax cut, and boom, the deficit exploded again. Well,
first, But your point, you just skip back past the whole point that when I was Speaker, we balanced the budget for 4 straight years. We were paying off the national debt, not increasing the national debt. So I'm not going to try to defend George W. Bush's spending patterns. I think it was a mistake to go away from a balanced budget. I think we ought to go back to a balanced budget now.
Okay.
I think we need the discipline of a balanced budget. I think that we also need to have some kind of looking seriously at the level of corruption involved. When you have $32 billion stolen from the California Unemployment Fund, mostly by criminals in California prisons who are using the prison computer systems, there's something profoundly wrong with the whole system. So I'm for tightening up everything. I'm for taking the Pentagon and turning it into a triangle, because you don't need 31,000 people sitting in that building, which was designed for people who are using manual typewriters.
So are you saying that you think we should roll back the Trump tax cuts too?
No, I think I'd leave. I'm for lower taxes because I'm for more freedom and more money in your pocket. Okay. But I'm also for a smaller government and for cutting out the waste and cutting out the corruption and getting back to a balanced budget.
You have, throughout the years that you were in Congress, repeatedly pointed out that it's destructive to people to give them free money. Whether it's free housing or free food or, any kind of welfare payments generally, particularly over a long period of time, and particularly enough money that they never have to work again. Please, correct me if I've mischaracterized that. Is that the case?
Yeah, it's actually a paraphrase of Franklin Delano Roosevelt's 1935 State of the Union speech, where Roosevelt says, welfare ultimately undermines and debilitates the entire society, and that we should be very careful not to create a system of permanent welfare. So in that sense, I'm quoting the greatest Democratic president of the 20th century who understood culturally that if you create a dependency class, that it is very, very dangerous, and it's very bad for the people who end up on welfare.
Yeah, I completely agree with you and Franklin Roosevelt. And And in fact, it would be even worse if those people who are now, you know, damaged and lazy as a consequence of getting all this free money had considerable power in society as well. Therefore, shouldn't we tax inheritances at 100% so that we don't create a whole class of trust fund babies who now not only are damaged and you know, lazy, but also have considerable political because of their wealth?
Well, I mean, I find your premise fascinating. Why do you think it's your right to say to a parent or a grandparent who's worked their whole lifetime, we're not going to take care of your family, we're going to take all of your money away for the government?
Because,
I mean,
because you just told me that it would be a bad thing to do to your children.
Well, but I also think it's a very bad thing to have government think that it's their money, that they didn't earn the money. The government. I mean,
so you're saying that government money makes people lazy, but daddy's money doesn't?
I think that it depends on how smart daddy is. And I know a lot of successful people who put their kids on allowances and make them work for it. I don't, you know. But I'm also raising a deeper point, which is, why do you think it's your money? Why do you think it's your right to say to a parent or a grandparent, I'm taking away your lifetime's work because I have moral superior judgment to you, and I'm going to save your child because I'm going to intervene and rip off all of your money?
Well, it's essentially the same.
That's their money.
Is it not the same thing as saying, no, I'm not going to help you out with food or housing or other things, you know, or even disaster relief because, you know, it's going to make you lazy and crazy?
No, see, I mean, you jump wildly. I'm not against disaster relief. For that matter, I'm not against food for people who are needed. No, disaster relief, in fact, is a collective act of the society to overcome, for example, Katrina. I went to school. I spent 3 years in New Orleans going to graduate school at Tulane. And I went down and visited after Katrina, and it's clear they needed help. Communities can band together to help each other. There's nothing wrong with that if the help is temporary. But if you had turned around and said, why don't we give New Orleans money for the next 60 years, I'd have said that would be bad. First of all, it would lead immediately to corruption, but it would also teach the wrong habits. So I think if you need food, we ought to find a way for you to be able to work. Now, again, I'm not talking about people with very severe disabilities. I think that's a different challenge. But I think a community can apply common sense and not automatically go to these kind of extreme interpretations.
Yeah. Okay. There's a new TV show out about the Clinton impeachment. I'm guessing you might have seen it. I'm curious.
No, I haven't seen it.
It's pretty fascinating. It's entirely viewpoint of women. You know, Linda Tripp and Monica Lewinsky and Hillary Clinton by and large. I'm curious what it was like managing Clinton's impeachment. You know, for a BJ, when you were in the midst of an extramarital affair.
Well, the impeachment, in my view, the impeachment was never about his personal behavior. That was the popular press view. I think it was a big mistake by Ken Starr to focus on it. My view was very simple. Bill Clinton committed perjury, which is a felony, in testifying in a case that had been brought against him by a woman who alleged, and I think it was upheld, that he, in fact, as her employer, as governor of Arkansas, had coerced her into sex. Now, he lied under oath. Lying under oath is a felony. You can go to jail for it. In fact, in the end, Clinton had to give up his license to practice law in Arkansas and had to pay a fine. It wasn't, because I was approached by some of Clinton's friends along the line you just said. And I said, look, you know, I'm a guy who's been divorced. And I understood when I went through the divorce proceedings that if they asked me questions, for example, about how much money I had, if I lied under oath, I was undermining the whole process of the justice system. Bill Clinton is a Yale-educated lawyer. He understood what he was doing was a fundamental violation of the system. And I think had Starr stayed focused at that level and stayed away from the sex, that in fact it was a much harder case for Clinton to defend.
Yeah, it was certainly an interesting time. You and the Bush administration, you know, during that era, were pushing hard for NAFTA specifically, which was negotiated by the George W. Bush administration and then signed by Bill Clinton. over the objections of mostly progressive Democrats, people like Bernie Sanders, who were saying, no, wait a minute, or Ross Perot. Now we've got this interesting thing of Josh Hawley out here saying, wait a minute, this was a terrible mistake. We should be making things in America again. And yet most of the Republican caucus is still all in on neoliberal free trade. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think first of all, if the choice is between building a factory in Mexico or China, I prefer Mexico. Second, I think that in some ways we greatly underestimated what the price differential would do. There's no question, for example, with China, that we have completely mismanaged that relationship to the enormous advantage of the Chinese dictatorship. So I would probably be more cautious now than I was back in the early 90s, because both with China and with Mexico, I think we had an illusion about how it would work, and it did not work to our advantage the way we thought it would.
Yeah, it's clearly turned out that way. Last question. What is it about Viktor Orban's Hungary that is so appealing to conservatives and Republicans? Is it his use of racism, his packing the courts, the crony capitalism, the fact that he's handed over all the media to his buddy oligarchs, putting political opponents in prison? I don't get it.
Well, I suspect. Well, first of all, I'm not sure. I don't spend much time on Orban, so I don't know that I can.
CPAC is holding their convention there this year in Hungary.
Who is?
CPAC.
Who's holding it?
And Tucker Carlson
okay.
just did a show for a week from Budapest. So it's a hot thing right now on your side.
I mean, all I could tell you is, first of all, that I don't, at a time when we have this whacked out idea that you can accept anybody who wants to show up from anywhere at any time with no assimilation. Orban's defense of Hungarian nationalism is not a bad thing. And as somebody who deeply distrusts the Brussels bureaucracy, I kind of favor almost any leader in the European Union who stands up to the bureaucrats in Brussels. So, but I don't have enough detailed knowledge. I also say, by the way, that I'm into the fact that Orban took on Soros and beat him because I think Soros is an enormous danger to democracy everywhere in the world.
Soros paid for Orban to go to college. How did Orban beat Soros? What did I miss?
Oh, so Soros ran a campaign to try to defeat Orban for re-election. And Orban made Soros the #1 issue.
So Soros was funding his opponent, you're saying?
Yeah, massively.
Yeah, interesting.
Just as Soros, by the way, funds pro-criminal, anti-police district attorneys all over the country.
In the United States?
I mean, Soros is in the United States. I mean, Soros is a very complicated, weird guy.
Interesting. Yeah, I've met him. Newt Gingrich, former Speaker of the House of Representatives. His new book is Beyond Biden, Rebuilding the America We Love. Gingrich 360, at Newt Gingrich on Twitter. Congressman, thank you for dropping by and taking some tough questions. I appreciate it.
No, it was great fun. I enjoyed it.